All right, as we start to build these mathematical tools, these simple mathematical tools that help us with our new paradigm, and our paradigm then builds new ideas that we can maintain some kind of logical coherence, which has been sorely lacking. And as we do this, we start to find these things, these familiar ideas that are just incoherent. They're just wrong. I mean, they're all over the place. And they're all related. They're all related to this linear idea. Okay, we need to get rid of this idea that life is linear. I mean, we have these lineages. They have this idea that there's a line that goes from one cell to all cells. That's just insane. That's insane. Okay. But now we finally have these mathematical tools that can help us visualize what's actually going on. And this whole thing is a fractal, and it's all about information. It's all about entropy. And so if we go back to the beginning of time on Earth, we don't find much molecular information. But with each clock tick until today, now today we can go out and we find all this molecular information. Well, that's the functional imperative of life. It's generating molecular information, okay? Well, we can visualize that graphically. And then we can see how stupid some things are. I mean, what's dumber than the idea of sexual reproduction? I mean, think about it. It's like jumbo shrimp. It's like a subatomic particle. I mean, this is an oxymoron. We don't sexually reproduce, okay? That's called cloning. Cloning is reproduction, okay? We sexually produce. The point of sexual reproduction is not to reproduce, it's to produce something new. I mean, if life wanted to reproduce, it could. Okay, it doesn't want to do that. It wants to produce novelty. Okay, this whole idea, this idea of evolution as being this conservative process, I mean, that's false. It's not conservative at all. This is balls to the wall. I mean, life is using the most radical search tools that it can find. Sexual reproduction is one of those tools. Think about it. I mean, life proves that it can take a zygote, make a perfectly good human. It has no interest whatsoever in reproducing that human. It would rather produce two of them, randomly take half of one and randomly take half of the other, and then randomly combine them, and it's betting that this new thing might be a little bit better. Okay, that's balls to the wall. That depends on a perfectly symmetrical language. There has to be a symmetry between the one human and the other human, their language, so that you can symmetrically recombine these two genetic codes and create a brand new one. Well, this is life's strategy. Life's not trying to go vertical. Life's trying to go as horizontal as it can. Well, think about it in terms of a lottery ticket. Well, if you're going to win the lottery, the first ticket matters, okay? You go from 0 to 1. The second ticket doesn't matter because your odds are barely better than with the 1, so you're paying as much for the second ticket. Well, that's life's idea about sexual reproduction. How many of these different things are we going to combine? Well, if you're going to take 2 humans and combine them, taking 3 humans and combining them barely gives you any more, bang for your buck. You're still spending, but you're not gaining. So the sexual reproduction is you go from one cell that divides, that would be, prokaryotic production. Well, those 2 cells aren't identical, okay? They have subtle changes, okay? And life wants those changes because it's going to feed off of that variation. Well, it's going to make sure that it has phages and other things that it wants to laterally transfer information on a timeline. So if we think about these things in terms of a line, all right, that's all of life. This is the whole range of life. Well, that's at time 0. Now at time 1, life's making a few changes to the curve. Okay, each one of those nodes now is information. So as we start adding nodes to the curve, it's the evolution of the curve through time. That's what life is doing. It's generating entropy. It's making sure that the new nodes are precise and reliable, but it wants to make more nodes. So what it's doing, if we look at life, we can see that at time 0, time 1, time 2, time 3, okay, one curve per timeline, and then iterate the timeline. And so what it's doing is it's generating this incredibly complex spatio-temporal curve that it's building literal manifestations of that curve with the atoms. Those atoms represent a literal form of spatial mathematics. Life is evolving its mathematics. So it's 100% logical. Okay, there's no superstition, there's no vital force. The life is a force of nature. Okay, we need to think of it that way. We need to think of these timelines. You know, sexual reproduction, that's taking two nodes and making a new node like this. But it's betting the farm on the idea that it can create the next population. Is there's no reproduction. Life doesn't want to waste atoms, the precious atoms, on reproducing stuff. Once it's proven that it works, it's going to use that to find something else that works. So sexual reproduction is this hyper aggressive search strategy. You know, these mutations, this is a mutation. Okay, they're not happening one little dot at a time. They're taking clouds of dots. You know, that your son is a ginormous mutation from you and your wife. Okay, that's not just a one at a time thing, that's an all at a time thing. But it requires a symmetrical language, and there has to be symmetry across the full curve. Life is using the same language for the full curve. It's one structure. It's searching horizontally in time and space, and each clock tick, it learns. It's learning. It's getting better. It's getting more complex, okay? So the molecular information is increasing. Just like Erwin Schrödinger said, it's feeding on this. Each population feeds the next population. I mean, think about it. Last common ancestor. You got two parents. They got two parents. They got two parents. You got more ancestors than you have descendants. You'll never have as many descendants as you have ancestors. So if it's a tree, it goes the other way. It goes backwards to the tree. But it's not a tree. It's not a lineage, okay? Like my grandmother, bless her heart, she insisted that our ancestor was the first baby born on the Mayflower. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. Do the math. At the time that he was alive, I would probably have about 1 million other ancestors during that time period. So all of those ancestors contribute 1/1,000,000th of my genetic information. So what's the point? I mean, that guy's irrelevant. so you know, you can't go back in time to where you get one cell and then it just explodes and all. No. At the point in time where you have the complexity of a cell, I mean, it's harder to go from nothing to a cell than it is to go from a cell to all of life. So the math before the cell couldn't have been any different than the math after the cell. So there had to be this balls out lateral transfer of information at that time period, okay? The first cell is not a remarkable event, okay? It's a complex symmetrical network of information, okay? And at the time of that first cell, there were trillions of different cells, but they're all exchanging information. So you can't just say, freeze, that's the guy, and then he gets to do everything. No, never is that true. It's always lateral. Okay, we got to think in terms of a line that's getting more curved. It's getting infinitely curved. Life is creating this infinite curve, and it's using the most aggressive search strategies available. And this ball represents an extremely aggressive search strategy. Okay, now, you know, they don't tell you this, but you go through this process of saying DNA, mRNA, tRNA, amino acids, but there is, what's the relationship between the tRNA and the codon and the amino acid? The answer is it's a protein. Okay, you got to have a protein. It's called an AARS. There's, a set of these things. Well, it goes out and it says, okay, you're proline. I'm going to put you on this tRNA molecule. Well, that's a ginormous recursion. That is a recursion. In order to make this table, you have to have a protein. But in order to make that protein, you have to have this table. So this table is a self-reference. You have to create proteins to make this table. And you have to create this table to make these proteins. So it's, it's this homunculus, this recursion. They don't tell you that because why would they? They don't know what they're talking about. So, that protein could just decide in any minute that this isn't going to be proline anymore. I'm going to put proline over here. So it has this ability to shuffle this table whenever it wants. And it does. It'll shuffle it depending on the resources available at the time that it's making this table. This table isn't even real. It's a thought. Okay. So it's based on these huge numbers of molecular events. It's the averaging of, it's like a gas, it's like the averaging of these behaviors. Okay, but these behaviors are so damn dependable. They're so low entropy. This represents an enormous amount of selection, of decreasing the entropy to 4 and 20. And to these, you watch these molecules do this. And it's like, that's impossible, dude. There's no way. How are they doing it? And the answer is they've learned it. It's a learned behavior. They've practiced it. They've done this so many times. The outcome is a given. If CCC shows up over here, then proline will show up over there. Okay, that's not a fully determined thing. That's an underdetermined thing. Okay, that's a probability thing. That's not a you must do this. That is, you want to do this. That's a good thought. I think CCC, proline ought to go together. Well, that's a good thought. Okay, so this whole horse shit about these linear associations, that's got to go. You can't understand what a codon is if you're using that brain damaged idea. So you lose the narrative about a lineage. I mean, that's brain damage. Sexual reproduction. That's not reproduction. That's production. Life is producing novelty. Those are the pleasant surprises. Okay, it doesn't want any ugly surprises down low, but when it gets out to the frilly edge of that curve, it's an artist. It's creating new curves. Okay, it wants pleasant surprises, so it has to set itself up. And this is a ginormous surprise. You take two humans, you randomly combine them, and then boom! What a surprise! Look at that. It's got 10 fingers and 10 toes. What a lucky break. It could have had any. It could just be any kind of monstrosity. As some of my kids are. I'm not going to say which ones, but anyway. So now, with this paradigm, with this correct paradigm, we start to get these mathematical tools that give us visual tools, that give us, linguistic tools. We can start saying things that are true, that are mathematically coherent. Okay, this idea of a last common ancestor, that's not coherent. That's not possible. That's mathematically impossible. It doesn't move this. It doesn't move the ball down the field any. It actually, we're running in the wrong direction. It's a complex network. Life is this multivariate complex network of properties that are self-referential, that are generating new sets at every clock tick. And with each generation of the sets, just look at how much more complex life is now than it was 2,000 years ago. I mean, now man itself is an organism that's evolving. Our ideas, our thoughts, that's the new medium in which life is evolving. We're evolving. These artificial intelligences aren't they're not results of this process. They're symptoms of it. Okay, this is the telos of the universe. Intelligence is the telos. That's what the universe is built to generate. It's based on a fundamental logic that is intelligence. It's this natural selection. The genetic algorithm is operating on the universe. And over 15 billion years, we end up with us. And now we've created this meta-organism called man, society, that's now we're we're now projecting ourselves out into the universe again. We're sending out spaceships. It's pretty cool, but we got to get our math right before we can actually appreciate it. We got to stop saying stupid things like all I've descended from a single cell. That's just stupid. Okay, sexual reproduction. That's stupid. It's sexual production. Okay, let's get the math right, and then we can start telling stories. So, what do you guys want to talk about now?